Jake Morrison crouched behind a broken concrete wall and checked his watch. 3 hours until sunrise on planet Zerion 7. The abandoned mining colony stretched out before him like a graveyard of rusted metal and cracked stone. Empty buildings stood silent in the pale moonlight. Somewhere in this maze of dead structures was the stolen Earth technology he needed to find. He pulled out his scanner and swept it across the area. The device beeped softly, showing heat signatures from the main facility about 200 meters ahead. Jake frowned. The intel said this place was completely empty. Either his information was wrong, or he was walking into trouble. Jake moved forward carefully, keeping low and staying in the shadows. His boots made no sound on the dusty ground. Years of military training had taught him how to move like a ghost. He reached the edge of the facility and pressed himself against a metal wall. Through a broken window, he could see flickering lights. Inside, high above on a distant ridge, Lyrale Moon Whisper lay flat on her stomach behind her sniper rifle. Her elven eyes, sharp as a hawk's, watched Jake through her scope. She had been tracking the human for the past hour, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "Target in sight," she whispered into her communicator. Her voice carried the confidence of someone who had lived for 300 years and never missed a shot. "Remember, we need him alive," came the reply from Commander Zara Vex. The reptilian alien's voice was cold and calculated. "My scientists want to study human tactics. Try not to damage him too much." Lyrale smiled, showing perfect white teeth. "Only a human," she scoffed. "This won't take long. These primitive creatures have no idea what real warfare looks like." She adjusted her scope and watched Jake move through the facility grounds. To her ancient eyes, he looked clumsy and predictable. Humans had only been in space for a few decades. What could they possibly know about combat compared to races that had been fighting wars for thousands of years? Jake felt something was wrong. His instincts, sharpened by years of dangerous missions, screamed at him to be careful. He stopped moving and scanned the area around him. Nothing seemed out of place, but the feeling wouldn't go away. He pulled out a small mirror and used it to check the high ground around the facility. That's when he saw it, a tiny glint of light from the ridge. Sniper scope. Jake's heart rate stayed steady. Panic would get him killed. Instead, he pretended not to notice and kept moving toward the main building. But now he changed his pattern. Instead of walking in straight lines, he began to zigzag randomly. He ducked behind cover every few steps and changed direction without warning. Lyrale watched with growing irritation. "What is he doing?" she muttered. The human's movements made no sense. No trained soldier moved like that. It was chaotic and unpredictable. She lined up her shot, aiming for his leg. A simple wound would stop him without causing permanent damage. Her finger moved to the trigger. Jake suddenly dove to the left, rolling behind a pile of mining equipment just as Lyrale fired. The plasma bolt sizzled through the air where he had been standing a second before. It hit a metal pipe, melting it instantly. "Impossible," Lyrale whispered. How had he known? Jake smiled grimly from behind cover. Amateur mistake. The sniper had given away her position with that shot. Now he knew exactly where she was. He also knew he wasn't dealing with just one enemy. The plasma signature was elven technology, which meant this was probably a mixed alien force. His communicator crackled to life. "Jake Morrison," a cold female voice said. "This is Commander Zara Vex of the Galactic Alliance Enforcement Division. You are surrounded. Surrender now, and you will not be harmed." Jake checked his equipment. He had basic weapons, some explosives, and his wits. Against unknown numbers of alien soldiers with superior technology, those weren't great odds. But he'd been in worse situations before. "Sorry, Commander," he replied into his comm. "I've got somewhere else to be." Jake pulled out a small explosive charge and attached it to a nearby gas pipe. The old mining facility was full of abandoned machinery and chemical systems. If he was going to survive this, he needed to level the playing field. Commander Zara hissed in frustration from her command post. "Take him down! Non-lethal force only!" Lyrale adjusted her position and fired again. This time, Jake was ready. He triggered his explosive at the exact moment she pulled the trigger. The gas pipe exploded in a shower of sparks and flame, creating a wall of fire between them. Using the distraction, Jake sprinted toward the main building. He could hear alien voices shouting in languages he didn't recognize. Heavy footsteps echoed from multiple directions. They were closing in. He reached the building's entrance and paused. Going inside could be a trap, but staying outside meant certain capture. Jake made his choice and slipped through the doorway into the dark interior. The building was huge, filled with conveyor belts, processing machines, and metal walkways that stretched up into shadows. Perfect terrain for someone who knew how to use it. Lyrelay snarled and repositioned herself for a better angle. The human had surprised her once, but it wouldn't happen again. She was an elven warrior with centuries of experience. He was just a primitive creature who had gotten lucky. "Ketha, take your team and flush him out," Commander Zara ordered. "Drive him toward Lyrelay's position." The massive orcish warrior grunted acknowledgement and gestured to her soldiers. They began moving toward the building from multiple angles. Jake found a maintenance ladder and climbed to the second level. From here, he could see the entire facility floor. He counted at least 6 alien soldiers moving in formation toward the building. Professional, coordinated, and heavily armed. He smiled despite the danger. They thought they were hunting him, but Jake had other plans. In his experience, the best defense was a good offense, and he was about to show these aliens what human creativity could accomplish. The hunt was about to begin, but Jake Morrison intended to be the hunter, not the prey. Lyrelay moved to a new position on the ridge, her elven grace making her silent as a shadow. Through her scope, she watched the alien soldiers enter the facility building. This should be over quickly. 6 trained warriors against 1 human was hardly a fair fight. She settled into her new spot and scanned the building's windows. The human would have to show himself eventually. When he did, she would be ready. Inside the facility, Jake had reached the 3rd level. The building was a maze of metal walkways, hanging chains, and massive processing equipment. Decades of mining. Operations had left behind a perfect playground for someone with tactical training. He could hear the alien soldiers on the ground floor, moving carefully through the machinery. Their heavy footsteps echoed in the empty space. Jake counted 6 distinct movement patterns. They were spreading out to cover all exits. Jake pulled out a length of cable from an old winch system. The mining facility was full of useful materials, if you knew what to look for. He began rigging a simple trap near the main stairway. Ketha led her team deeper into the building. The orcish warrior stood nearly 7 feet tall, with muscles like steel cables. Her enhanced senses could detect the human's scent, but it seemed to be everywhere. The smell was confusing, scattered throughout the building. "He's been moving around a lot," she growled into her communicator. "Can't pin down his exact location." "Just find him," Commander Zara replied from outside. "How difficult can it be to catch one primitive human?" Ketha gestured to 2 of her soldiers. They moved toward the eastern side of the building while she took the rest toward the center. The human was trapped. All they had to do was squeeze the net closed. Jake watched from above as the aliens split into 2 groups. Perfect. Divide and conquer was one of the oldest tactics in warfare, but it worked both ways. He moved silently along the upper walkway toward the smaller group. The 2 alien soldiers were some kind of reptilian species, carrying energy weapons that hummed with power. They moved efficiently but predictably, checking corners and maintaining formation, just like they had been trained. Jake dropped a wrench from the walkway above. It clanged loudly on the metal floor 20 feet away from the soldiers. Both aliens immediately turned toward the sound, weapons raised. While they were distracted, Jake lowered himself down on a chain behind them. He landed softly and picked up a heavy pipe from the floor. The aliens were still focused on the area where the wrench had fallen. Jake stepped forward and swung the pipe at the first alien's knee. The joint cracked with a wet sound. The soldier screamed and fell. Before the second alien could turn around, Jake grabbed a handful of metal shavings from a nearby workbench and threw them into the creature's eyes. The alien clawed at its face, temporarily blinded. Jake tackled it to the ground and used zip ties from his kit to secure both soldiers. In less than 30 seconds, he had taken down 2 enemies without firing a shot. Lyrelay heard the commotion through her communicator but couldn't see what was happening inside the building. "What's going on down there?" she demanded. "2 of my soldiers just went silent," Ketha replied, her voice tense with anger. "This human is more dangerous than expected." "Impossible," Lyrelay said. He's just one primitive creature with basic weapons. You have superior numbers and technology." But even as she said it, doubt crept into her voice. The human had already survived her sniper shot and taken down 2 trained soldiers. Maybe she had underestimated him. Jake was already moving to his next position. He climbed back up to the walkways and headed toward the main group. Ketha and her remaining 3 soldiers were moving more cautiously now, checking every shadow and corner. He reached a control panel for one of the old conveyor belt systems. Most of the machinery was dead, but the emergency systems still had power. Jake studied the controls for a moment, then began flipping switches. Deep in the building's basement, ancient motors groaned to life. Conveyor belts started moving with loud mechanical sounds. Processing equipment began cycling through startup sequences, the entire facility filled with noise and motion. Ketha's team spun around as machinery activated all around them. The sudden noise was overwhelming, making it impossible to hear approaching footsteps or whispered commands. "What did he do?" one of the soldiers shouted over the mechanical racket. Jake used the noise as cover to move closer. He had positioned himself on a walkway directly above the alien team. From his toolkit, he pulled out a small explosive charge and a timer. But instead of using it as a weapon, Jake attached the charge to a support beam for one of the conveyor systems. He set the timer for 30 seconds and moved away quickly. The explosion was small, but precisely placed. The conveyor belt collapsed, creating a barrier between Ketha and 2 of her soldiers. The Orcish warrior found herself separated from half. Her team, "Regroup at the north entrance," she ordered into her communicator. But as she moved toward the rendezvous point, Jake was already there, waiting. He had rigged another trap using mining equipment. As Ketha passed under a loading crane, Jake triggered the release. A container full of metal ore dropped toward her. Ketha's reflexes saved her life. She dove aside as the container crashed to the floor where she had been standing. But the impact sent metal fragments flying in all directions. Several pieces struck her armor and one cut across her arm. For the first time, the mighty Orcish warrior felt something she hadn't experienced in years: fear. This human wasn't fighting like any enemy she had faced before. He wasn't trying to match their superior strength and technology. Instead, he was using the environment itself as a weapon. "Commander," Ketha spoke into her communicator, breathing hard. "This human is employing tactics we haven't seen before. He's turning the facility against us." Commander Zara's voice crackled with static. "Explain." "He's not fighting us directly. He's using traps, environmental hazards, and psychological warfare. My team is scattered and demoralized." Lyrelay listened to the conversation with growing frustration. How could trained alien warriors be struggling against one human? It made no sense. She had lived for 3 centuries and fought in dozens of wars. Humans were newcomers to galactic civilization. They had no experience with real combat. "Fall back and regroup," Commander Zara ordered. "We'll seal the building and wait him out. He can't stay in there forever." But Jake had no intention of waiting. While the aliens regrouped outside, he was studying the facility's layout. The building had multiple levels, maintenance tunnels, and old mining shafts that connected to other parts of the complex. He found what he was looking for in the basement: a service tunnel that led to the main power station. If he could cut power to the entire complex, the aliens would lose their technological advantages. Jake gathered supplies from the facility's emergency kits and began making his way through the tunnel. The aliens thought they had him trapped, but he was about to show them that humans didn't think like other species. Above ground, Lyrelay repositioned herself again, searching for any sign of movement in the building windows. But the facility had gone completely dark and silent. The human had vanished like smoke. "Where is he?" she muttered, scanning systematically through her scope. She was about to find out that in warfare, sometimes the hunter becomes the hunted. And Jake Morrison was just getting started. Jake reached the power station through the underground tunnel. The facility was older than he had expected, with backup systems and manual overrides from decades past. Perfect for what he had in mind. He studied the main control panel and found the master switches. But instead of simply cutting the power, Jake began a more complex plan. He rerouted the electrical systems to create controlled blackouts throughout the complex. Some areas would stay lit while others went dark, creating confusion and splitting the alien forces. Outside, Commander Zara was growing impatient. Status report, Lyrelay. Do you have eyes on the target? Negative, the elven sniper replied through gritted teeth. He's been silent for 20 minutes, no movement detected. Ketha, what's the condition of your team? The orcish warrior's voice was strained. 2 soldiers down, 1 injured. The human is using tactics we don't understand. He's not fighting like any species in our database. Suddenly, the lights in the main facility began flickering on and off, in random patterns. Some sections went completely dark while others blazed with emergency lighting. The power grid was going crazy. What now? Zara hissed. Jake's voice came over the facility's intercom system. He had patched into the communication network. Good evening, ladies. Hope you're enjoying your stay on Zarion 7. I thought we should have a little chat. Lyrelay pressed her eye harder against her scope, searching frantically for the source of his transmission. How had he accessed their communications? You want to study human tactics, Commander? Jake continued, his voice echoing through the empty buildings. Here's lesson 1. Humans don't play by your rules. We make our own. Commander Zara activated her own communicator. You're trapped, human. Surrender now and we'll treat you with respect? Jake laughed. Respect? Is that what you call hunting someone for sport? I don't think so. The lights suddenly went out completely, plunging the entire complex into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in a few seconds later, but the damage was done. The aliens' night vision equipment was designed for consistent lighting conditions. The sudden changes had disrupted their systems. Night vision compromised, Ketha reported. Switching to thermal imaging, but Jake had planned for that too. Before cutting the power, he had activated the facility's old heating system. Hot air was now blowing through vents throughout the complex, creating thermal interference that made heat-sensing equipment nearly useless. Lyrelay realized with growing alarm that she was losing her primary advantages. Her scope's advanced targeting systems were struggling with the inconsistent lighting and thermal interference. For the first time in her long life, she felt vulnerable. I'm moving to a closer position, she announced. I need to get within basic visual range. Negative, Commander Zara replied. Maintain overwatch from your current position. My current position is useless, Lyrelay snapped. The human has neutralized our technological advantages. I need to engage him directly. Against orders, the elven sniper began packing up her equipment. Her pride couldn't accept that a primitive human was outsmarting her. She would prove her superiority up close. Jake watched through a security camera as Lyrelay abandoned her sniper nest and began moving toward the facility. He had been hoping she would do exactly that. Long-range snipers were dangerous, but they were much more vulnerable when forced into close-quarters combat. He quickly moved through the maintenance tunnels to reach the main processing chamber. This was where he would make his stand. The huge room was filled with conveyor belts, heavy machinery, and multiple levels connected by staircases and walkways. It was a 3-dimensional battlefield that favored someone who knew how to use vertical space. Jake rigged several more traps throughout the chamber. He attached explosive charges to support beams, creating potential avalanches of machinery. He loosened bolts on walkway railings and weakened ladder rungs. The room became a maze of hidden dangers. Lyrelay entered the facility through a side entrance, her plasma rifle ready. She moved with the fluid grace of her elven heritage, every step silent and precise. Her enhanced hearing picked up the subtle sounds of machinery settling and metal cooling. I'm inside the main building, she reported. Beginning systematic search. She climbed to the 2nd level and began moving through the facility. Her elven eyes adapted quickly to the changing light conditions. Even without her scope's assistance, she was still a formidable hunter. Jake watched her approach through the security cameras. She was good, he had to admit. Her movements were professional and careful, but she was also predictable, following standard search patterns that Jake had studied during his military training. When Lyrelay reached the entrance to the main processing chamber, Jake triggered his first surprise. He activated one of the old conveyor belt systems, sending it into motion with a loud mechanical roar. Lyrelay spun toward the sound, rifle raised. The moving belt cast shifting shadows throughout the chamber, creating dozens of potential hiding spots. She advanced cautiously into the room. Human, she called out. I know you're in here. Face me like a warrior instead of hiding like a coward. Jake's voice echoed from speakers throughout the chamber. Coward? I prefer the term tactically, flexible. Here's lesson 2. Humans fight to win, not to look impressive. A metal pipe fell from the ceiling, clanging loudly near Lyrale's position. She fired instinctively, her plasma bolt melting the pipe instantly. But it was just a distraction. While she was focused on the pipe, Jake dropped down from a walkway behind her. He had planned to disarm her, but Lyrale's reflexes were faster than he expected. She spun around and fired. Jake barely managed to dodge, the plasma bolt singing past his ear. He rolled behind a massive processing machine as Lyrale pursued him. Finally, she breathed, excitement replacing frustration. A real fight! She began hunting Jake through the machinery, using her superior speed and senses to track him. But Jake knew the terrain better. He led her deeper into the chamber, toward the traps he had prepared. As Lyrale climbed a stairway to reach a higher level, Jake triggered one of his explosive charges. The blast didn't target her directly, but it weakened the support structure of a conveyor system above her position. Tons of metal machinery began to collapse. Lyrale looked up in horror as a massive conveyor belt broke free from its moorings and plummeted toward her. She had a split second to make a choice. Keep hold of her rifle and try to dodge, or drop her weapon and use both hands to grab the stairway railing. The elven warrior chose survival. She released her grip on the plasma rifle and lunged for the railing as the conveyor belt crashed down where she had been standing. The rifle tumbled away, clattering across the chamber floor. Jake emerged from cover and quickly retrieved the weapon. He had practiced with various alien technologies during his military service and quickly found the rifle's basic controls. Lesson 3, he said, his voice now coming from directly behind Lyrale instead of the speakers. Never assume your enemy will fight the way you expect. Lyrale turned slowly to face him. For the first time in 3 centuries, she was looking down the barrel of her own weapon, held by someone she had dismissed as primitive prey. Only a human, right? Jake said with a grim smile. The hunter had indeed become the hunted. Lyrale stared at her own plasma rifle pointed at her chest. The weapon's blue energy core hummed with deadly power in Jake's steady hands. For 300 years, that rifle had been an extension of her will, a tool of precision and death. Now it was her potential executioner. Impossible, she whispered. The biometric locks should prevent anyone else from using it. Jake smiled grimly. Lesson 4. Humans are really good at breaking things that aren't supposed to be broken. He showed her the rifle's grip, where he had bypassed the security system using wire from the facility's electrical systems. Military engineering taught me a few tricks. The elven sniper's mind raced. Without her weapon, her centuries of training meant nothing. She was faster and stronger than the human, but the plasma rifle could cut her in half before she could cross the distance between them. What do you want? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Good question, Jake replied. He gestured with the rifle toward a stairway leading to the lower levels. Move. We're going downstairs where your friends can't see us. Lyrale had no choice but to obey. She walked slowly down the metal steps, her hands visible and empty. Behind her, Jake kept the rifle trained on her back. Every instinct screamed at her to turn and fight, but the weapon's energy hum reminded her that suicide wasn't an option. They reached the chamber's lower level, a maze of processing equipment and storage areas. Jake directed her toward a section, hidden from the upper walkways. Sit, he ordered, pointing to a metal crate. Lyrale sat down carefully, never taking her eyes off the rifle. You can't escape, human. Commander Zara has more soldiers coming. This facility is surrounded. Maybe, Jake said. But right now, that's not your biggest problem. He activated the facility's intercom system again. His voice echoed throughout the complex. Commander Zara, this is Jake Morrison. I have your sniper. Want to discuss terms? The response came immediately. If you harm her, human, I will make your death very slow and painful. I'm touched by your concern, Jake replied. But here's the situation. Your best hunter is now my prisoner. Your assault team is scattered and demoralized, and I'm getting very tired of being hunted like an animal. Lyrale watched Jake's face as he spoke. There was no cruelty there, no sadistic pleasure in having captured her. Just cold, professional calculation. She realized with a chill that he wasn't angry or emotional. He was simply solving a tactical problem. What are your terms? Commander Zara asked after a long pause. Simple. Pull back your forces and let me complete my mission. In exchange, I'll release your sniper unharmed. Unacceptable. You stole classified technology. We cannot allow you to escape with it. Jake looked at Lyrelay and shrugged. I tried the diplomatic approach. He switched off the intercom and began studying the plasma rifle more carefully. What are you doing? Lyrelay asked nervously. Learning, Jake replied. He had found the weapon's power settings and began making adjustments. This is fascinating technology, much more advanced than anything Earth has developed. The rifle's energy hum changed pitch as Jake modified its configuration. Lyralay's eyes widened as she recognized what he was doing. You're overloading the power core, she said. That weapon could explode and kill us both. Could, Jake agreed. Or it could create a very impressive demonstration of what happens when humans get creative with alien technology. He aimed the rifle at a massive support pillar and fired. The overcharged plasma bolt tore through the metal like paper, sending sparks and molten debris flying. The pillar collapsed with a thunderous crash, taking part of the upper walkway with it. The sound echoed throughout the facility. Jake activated the intercom again. Commander, that was just a warning shot. Your weapon technology is impressive, but it's not designed for the kind of modifications humans can dream up. I can turn this rifle into a bomb big enough to level this entire building. This time, the silence lasted much longer before Zara responded. You would die as well. Maybe. But your mission would fail completely, and you'd lose your best sniper. And your technology. That's a lot of explaining to do to your superiors. Lyrelay stared at Jake with new understanding. You're bluffing. No sane creature would threaten mutual destruction over a simple retrieval mission. Jake's expression didn't change. That's lesson 5. Humans aren't always sane by other species' standards. We're unpredictable. Sometimes we do things that don't make logical sense. He began making more modifications to the rifle. The energy core's hum became increasingly unstable. Lyrelay could see power fluctuations in the weapon's display that made her extremely nervous. Stop, she said urgently. If that core destabilizes completely, the explosion will be massive. I know, Jake replied calmly. I studied the technical specifications during my military service. Elven plasma technology is incredibly powerful, but also incredibly volatile when pushed beyond safe parameters. The intercom crackled to life. Human, this is Ketha. Release the elf and I'll face you in single combat. Winner takes all. Jake laughed. Thanks for the offer, but I've seen what orcish warriors can do in hand-to-hand combat. I'd rather stick with my current advantage. He made another adjustment to the rifle. Now the entire weapon was vibrating with barely contained energy. Even he looked nervous about what he had created. Commander Zara, he called over the intercom. You have 60 seconds to start pulling your forces back. After that, I'm going to find out just how big an explosion this rifle can make. Lyrelay could hear the fear in her own voice. He's serious, Commander. Humans don't think like us. They're capable of actions that make no tactical sense. Another long silence. Then, reluctantly, very well, human. We are withdrawing to a safe distance. But this isn't over. I didn't think it would be, Jake replied. Through the facility's windows, they could see alien soldiers moving away from the building. Jake watched them go, still keeping the unstable rifle pointed in a safe direction. When the last soldier had withdrawn, Jake began carefully reversing his modifications to the weapon. It was delicate work. One wrong adjustment could trigger the explosion he had threatened. Why didn't you just kill me? Lyrelay asked quietly. You had the perfect opportunity. Jake glanced at her while working on the rifle. Because I'm not a murderer. I'm a soldier. There's a difference. The rifle's power core finally stabilized. Jake set it aside and pulled out restraints to secure Lyrelay properly. Besides, he added, dead enemies don't learn lessons. And I want your people to understand something important about humans. What's that? Jake looked directly into her ancient elven eyes. We might be primitive by your standards. We might not have centuries of experience or superior technology. But we're survivors. And we're full of surprises. As he finished securing her restraints, Lyrelay realized that her opinion of humans had changed completely. They weren't primitive prey after all. They were something much more dangerous, an unknown quantity in a galaxy that thought it had seen everything. Jake picked up the plasma rifle and headed for the exit. He had a mission to complete, and thanks to his new weapon, the odds had just shifted dramatically in his favor. Behind him, Lyreley sat in the darkness, wondering what other surprises humanity might have in store for the galaxy. Jake made his way through the facility's maintenance tunnels, carrying Lyreley's plasma rifle and the stolen Earth technology he had come to retrieve. The alien forces had pulled back, but he knew they wouldn't stay away for long. Commander Zara was probably planning her next move already. He reached the facility's control room, where banks of old computers still held data about the mining operations. Jake connected his portable drive and began downloading everything he could find. The stolen technology was important, but intelligence about alien activities on Zarion 7 would be valuable too. Through the control room's windows, Jake could see heat signatures on his scanner. The aliens had positioned themselves around the facility at a safe distance, but they were definitely still there. Waiting. 30 minutes later, Jake heard footsteps on the metal stairs leading to the control room. He spun around, rifle ready, but relaxed when he saw who it was. Lyreley stood in the doorway, no longer restrained. Her hands were empty and raised slightly to show she wasn't armed. "How did you get free?" Jake asked, keeping the rifle pointed at her but not threatening. 300 years of experience includes learning how to escape from restraints," she replied. "But I'm not here to fight you." Jake studied her face carefully. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine curiosity. Then, "Why are you here?" Lyreley stepped slowly into the room, moving with careful, non-threatening motions. "To talk, and to understand." "Understand what?" "How you did it." She gestured around the facility. "How one human with basic equipment defeated a trained alien strike team. How you turned our own advantages against us." Jake lowered the rifle slightly but kept it ready. "I told you. Humans are full of surprises." "It's more than that," Lyreley insisted. "I've studied warfare for centuries. I've fought dozens of different species across the galaxy. But I've never encountered tactics like yours." She sat down on a metal crate, keeping her movements slow and visible. "Most species develop their fighting styles based on their natural abilities. Elves rely on precision and patience. Orcs use strength and aggression. Reptilians employ cold calculation and superior technology. And humans? That's what I'm trying to understand. You didn't fight like any species in our databases. You were chaotic, unpredictable, adaptive. You used the environment as a weapon. You turned our strengths into weaknesses." Jake nodded slowly. "That's because we don't have natural advantages like other species. We're not the strongest, or fastest, or smartest, so we learn to think differently. How? By being flexible, by adapting to whatever situation we face, by refusing to accept that there's only one way to solve a problem." Lyreley absorbed this information. "Is this how all humans fight?" "When we have to," Jake replied. "We prefer diplomacy, trade, cooperation. But when someone backs us into a corner," he shrugged, "we get creative." The intercom system crackled to life. Commander Zara's voice filled the room. "Lyreley, report your status immediately." Lyreley looked at Jake, then activated the communicator. "I'm safe, Commander. The human hasn't harmed me." "Are you still his prisoner?" "No, I'm here by choice." A long silence. Then, "Explain." Lyreley took a deep breath. "Commander, I recommend we allow the human to complete his mission and leave the planet." "What?" "That's unacceptable. Our orders are to capture him and retrieve the stolen technology. Our orders were based on the assumption that we were dealing with a primitive species," Lyreley replied. "That assumption was wrong." Jake watched this exchange with interest. He could leave now if he wanted to. The aliens were debating among themselves, and he had what he came for. But something made him stay and listen. "Lyreley, you will return to your position immediately," Commander Zara ordered. "That's a direct command." "With respect, Commander, I think we need to reconsider our approach to humans. This one individual defeated our entire strike team using nothing but basic equipment and tactical creativity." Ketha's voice joined the conversation. "The elf is right, Commander. I've never faced anything like this human. He fought like no creature I've ever encountered. Commander Zara's frustration was clear in her voice. He's just one primitive being, with simple weapons. No, Lyrelai said firmly. He's not, and neither are the rest of his species. We've been thinking about humans all wrong. Jake made a decision. He activated his own communicator and joined the conversation. Commander Zara, this is Jake Morrison. I'd like to make you an offer. I'm listening. I'll give you something more valuable than the technology I came to retrieve. I'll give you information that could save alien lives in future encounters with humans. Another pause. What kind of information? Jake looked at Lyrelai, who nodded encouragingly. A tactical analysis of this engagement. A detailed breakdown of human combat doctrine and strategic thinking. Consider it a professional courtesy from one warrior to another. Why would you do that? Because this conflict was based on a misunderstanding. Your people thought humans were primitive prey. My people will think you're just another alien threat. Both sides are wrong. Jake pulled out a data pad and began composing a report. Humans aren't primitive, Commander. We're different. We approach problems in ways that other species might not expect. That makes us dangerous when we're threatened. But it also makes us valuable as allies. He finished typing and transmitted the data. That report contains everything you need to know about engaging humans in the future. Use it wisely. Commander Zara's voice was thoughtful when she responded. This is unexpected. Why share this with us? Because the galaxy is full of real threats that require cooperation to face. Humans and aliens fighting each other is a waste of everyone's time and resources. Lyrelai stood up and moved to the window. Commander, I request permission to remain here and continue studying human tactics. Denied. We're withdrawing immediately. Then I formally resign my commission. The silence that followed was deafening. Jake stared at Lyrelai in surprise. You can't be serious, Commander Zara finally said. I've spent 3 centuries believing I understood warfare, Lyrelai replied. Today, a single human showed me how much I still have to learn. I want to understand this new perspective. Jake shook his head. That's not necessary. The report I sent contains everything you need to know. Data isn't the same as understanding, Lyrelai said. I want to learn how humans think, not just how they fight. Commander Zara's voice turned cold. If you abandon your post, you'll be considered a deserter. Then so be it. Jake looked at the elven warrior with new respect. You're willing to give up everything you've known for 3 centuries just to learn something new? Knowledge is the only thing worth pursuing, Lyrelai replied. And today you taught me that I know far less than I thought. Jake made another decision. He walked over to Lyrelai and handed her the plasma rifle. What are you doing? She asked, startled. Giving you a choice. You can take your weapon, rejoin your unit, and pretend this never happened. Or you can leave it here and prove that you're serious about learning. Lyrelai looked at the rifle in her hands. It represented everything she had been for 3 centuries, a precise, lethal, superior warrior. But it also represented the arrogance and assumptions that had nearly gotten her killed. She set the rifle down on the control panel. I choose to learn, she said simply. Commander Zara's voice came over the intercom one last time. Very well, Lyrelai Moonwhisper, you are officially expelled from the Galactic Alliance Enforcement Division. All alien forces withdraw immediately. Jake and Lyrelai watched through the windows as the alien ships lifted off from the planet's surface. Soon they were alone in the abandoned facility. So, Jake said, shouldering his pack. Ready for lesson 6? Which is? Humans always keep their word. I said I'd release you unharmed, and I did. But I also said I had somewhere else to be. He headed for the exit, then paused and looked back. If you really want to understand humans, you should know that we value students who are willing to learn. Earth could use someone with your experience and new perspective. Lyrelai smiled for the first time since the hunt began. Is that an invitation? It's an opportunity. What you do with it is up to you. As Jake disappeared into the tunnels, Lyrelai looked around the facility where she had learned the hardest lesson of her long life. She had come here believing humans were primitive prey. She was leaving with the understanding that they were something far more complex and dangerous. Survivors who refused to accept limitations. In the abandoned control room, her plasma rifle sat silent and forgotten. The weapon that had once defined her was no longer important. What mattered now was the knowledge that the galaxy was full of surprises, and humans were the biggest surprise of all. 6 months later, intelligence reports throughout the galactic community would be updated with a single line that changed how every species viewed humanity. Classification: unpredictable high-threat entities. Approach with caution and respect. The age of underestimating humans was over.